Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 730, and today is July 8th, 2024. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. Got a lot to talk about on today's show, but first, I need to talk to you guys about the Libertarian Institute. I have worked at the Institute for almost 8 full years now, so it's been quite some time. Pretty much the entire time the Institute has been open, I have been at least a blogger, and I have moved up. I'm now the news editor at that site. That means I'm writing news stories for y'all every day. I now put out this podcast every day, a news roundup every day, so I myself am producing a ton of content at the Libertarian Institute, and I'm just one small part of the Institute. We publish 14 books on a wide variety of subjects: COVID tyranny, the just overall power of Washington D.C. and how we need to, slay the beast in Washington, not only to end these wars, which we of course cover plenty at the Libertarian Institute, but also just to get back our own freedoms and to take back our own lives from the monster in Washington. And so, tons of great content at the Institute, new op-eds up every single day, tons of podcast content if that's what you're into. This show, the Scott Horton Show, Chasing Ghosts, Don't Tread on Anyone, Year Zero, Vital Descent. So we are doing a lot at the Libertarian Institute. We really are becoming a true powerhouse in the libertarian movement, and I am just so honored to be a part of it. And one of the things that I think makes the Institute so great is we rely on small dollar donors like the listeners of this show to make contributions. And sometimes, it's only 20, 30, 40 bucks, but that all adds up and allows us to be able to continue to say exactly what we want to say and exactly what we believe, cover all the hard stories, right? When the invasion of Ukraine is happening and the entire country is decked out in blue and yellow, it's the people at the Libertarian Institute who are out there every single day telling you the truth, countering the NATO Washington propaganda. So if you can, head on over to the Libertarian Institute. This is our summer fundraiser. We only do 2 fundraisers a year, so I promise we're not going to be shaking you down for money all the time or anything like that. But help us keep our doors open. Libertarianinstitute.org. You just go to the front page of the website. There's plenty of places to find the donation button. Or if you want to go directly there, libertarianinstitute.org/donate. Make a donation. There's great kickbacks. You want one of our books? Make a donation. Get yourself a book. We have ebooks available, all kinds of swag. So again, one more time, libertarianinstitute.org/donate. You'll hear me make this pitch a few more times over the next couple of weeks. But again, once we finish our fundraiser, we only do 2 of these things a year, guys. So we're not going to be asking you for a ton of money. We just need help keeping our doors open, keeping to pay our staff, and doing all the great work that we're doing over at the Institute. Now, trying to make some improvements on the show and listen to feedback. And some of the feedback I heard is that it could be just a little bit boring, Kyle, watching you scroll through the articles. So for people watching, if you're watching the audio version of the listening, which I think like 80% of you guys do, nothing has changed in this episode. But for those of you actual people who watch this show, this one's gonna look a little different. You'll see my face over on, I guess, the left side of these articles as I read through them. If you have any additional suggestions on how this could be improved, please let me know. But this seems to be what the people are asking for. So let's get into the news today. All right, this one from Dave DeCamp, July 4th, antiwar.com. Ukrainian drone workers injured in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant attack. And so these are Ukrainian drones injured 8 workers from the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant while they were at a nearby electrical substation, Russia's nuclear power company said on Wednesday. The site of the substation is about 2.5 miles from the ZMPP, which has come under frequent Ukrainian attacks since it was captured by Russian forces in February of 2022 during the first days of the invasion. Ukrainian armed forces attacked Radga substation where at the time staff from the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant were working, Rostam wrote on Telegram. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, condemned the attack. It said that the experts based at the ZMPP saw thick smoke and heard explosions coming from the plant's 750 watt kilovolt, not kilowatt, switch yard. The IAEA said the result of the attack, the substation was out of service, but the ZMPP was still receiving the electricity it needed to cool its reactors in shutdown and for other essential nuclear safety and security functions. The IAEA director, Rafael Grossi, said it is extremely concerning that these drone attacks are continuing despite the very clear dangers they present to the people in Heret, as well as to safety of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. They must stop immediately. The ZMPP is located in the town of Heret on the south bank of the Dnieper River. Ukraine controls the territory on the northern bank of the river and has launched several failed attempts to retake the ZMPP. A report from the Times revealed that the U.S. backed one of the attempts in October of 2022 when 600 Ukrainian commandos attempted to cross the river. The U.S. supported the raid by providing targeting data so Ukraine could use its U.S.-provided HIMARS rocket systems, which hit Russian positions on the southern bank of the river near the ZNPP. All right, next up here, this one is very concerning. All right, this one from Dave DeCamp on June 7th, antiwar.com. Russia steps up strikes on Ukrainian airfields ahead of F-16 delivery. So Russia has stepped up attacks on Ukrainian airfields as Kiev is preparing to receive its first batch of long-awaited U.S.-made F-16 fighter jets. Last week, Russia hit 3 airfields and said it destroyed a total of 7 aircraft, including 5 Soviet-made Su-27 fighter jets, 1 MiG-29 fighter jet, and an Mi-17 helicopter. In each attack, Russia published videos of the strikes as the airfields were being monitored by Russian drones. The successful Russian attacks are raising concern among Ukrainian officials about securing more Western jets. A Ukrainian MP, Ronan Kushkov, told AFP, "If we keep losing aircraft this way, no one will give us more." So a brigadier general and the chief of the aviation of the Ukrainian Air Force suggested last month that Ukraine could store some of its F-16s abroad to ensure they are not destroyed by Russia. That would mean placing them at NATO bases in Europe, making them potential targets for the Russian military. Ukraine is expected to receive its first F-16s from European NATO countries this month. The Netherlands has promised 24 F-16s for Ukraine, and on Saturday said they would be delivered without delay. The provision of F-16s to Ukraine will mark a significant escalation of NATO's involvement in the proxy war, as it will mark the first time the alliance has sent Western-made jets. The U.S. and several other European countries have been training Ukrainian pilots on the F-16s since last year. And remember, these are supposed to arrive last year. Ukrainian officials have now said that they don't think they're going to be extremely effective on the battlefield, as Russia has had plenty of time to gear up for their arrival. And it now seems that Russia is looking to overall prevent their arrival. Remember, while Ukraine has said that they want to store their fighter jets in other NATO countries, you would still imagine that NATO countries would like these planes to at least land, if not load up and equip in Ukraine, and then take off for its missions against Russia before returning to Ukrainian bases, and then maybe a NATO base for storage, maintenance, something like that. This would suggest that that really isn't possible if they can't even land at these airfields, because Russia has so much air superiority at this point in the war. So from the recent suggestions, one of them I got was, hey, put your face up while you're reading the articles. All right, I could do that. The second one was a little bit harder. They said, Kyle, you talk about way too much bad news. And I have a lot less control over what news I talk about, because I'm just, talking about the news of the day. And most of the time, the news coming from American foreign policy is very bad. but this is a little bit of good news here. This from Dave DeCamp, July 4th, antiwar.com. Philippines says U.S. will pull out controversial mid-range missile systems. So on Thursday, the Philippines said the U.S. was pulling out a new U.S.-made missile system it deployed to the Southeast Asian country for annual military exercises. The U.S. sent the Typhoon missile systems for the Balkana exercises, which are held in April and May. The Typhoon is a controversial launcher since it would have been banned by the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the INF Treaty, a treaty between the U.S. and Russia that the Trump administration withdrew from in 2019. The IDF prohibited land-based missiles with a range of between 310 and 3,400 miles. The Typhoon can launch nuclear-capable Tomahawk missiles, which have a range of about 1,000 miles. It can also fire SM-6 missiles, which can hit targets 290 miles away. So a Philippine colonel told AFP that the U.S. planned to withdraw the Typhoon from the Philippines following the military exercises. He said, as per plan, it will be shipped out of the country in September or even earlier. The U.S. is currently shipping out their equipment that they used during the exercises, right now. China strongly condemned the deployment of the Typhoon system, which U.S. officials have acknowledged was developed and prepared for a future conflict with Beijing over Taiwan or in the South China Sea. Russian President Vladimir Putin also recently mentioned the deployment. He made comments when calling for Moscow to follow the U.S. and develop missile systems that were banned by the INF Treaty. Putin said last week, "We need to start production of these missile systems and then, based on the actual situation, make decisions about whether it is necessary to ensure our freedom to place them," Putin said last week. The Russian leader added, "Today, it is known that the United States not only produces these missile systems, but has already brought them to Europe for exercises to Denmark. Quite recently, it was announced that they are in the Philippines." All right, moving on here to an article that I wrote for the Libertarian Institute on July 7th. War on Gaza causing surge in terrorism recruiting, says U.S. intel official. So the State Department's top intelligence official said that the Israeli war in Gaza is creating fertile recruitment for Islamic terrorist groups. The official, Brett Holmgren, is set for a promotion from the National Counterterrorism Center. That's NCTC. In an interview with the Washington Post, Holmgren explained the October 7th Hamas attack and the following Israeli response has been a recruiting opportunity for terrorist organizations, as well as an inspiration for lone wolf actors. The groups are exploiting the anger at Washington for its unrelenting support for Tel Aviv, as Israeli troops rampage through the Gaza Strip, killing over 38,000 Palestinians. Holmgren has headed the State Department's intelligence agency as Assistant Secretary of State for Intelligence and Research since 2021. He previously worked at the CIA, and his 2018 wedding was officiated by former President Barack Obama. During the Trump presidency, Holmgren was positioned outside the government, working as a vice president at Capital One. During Israel's 9-month onslaught in Gaza, over 15,000 children have been killed. This has resulted in a near daily stream of images and videos of dismembered and dead children circulating social media. Tel Aviv has additionally prevented most aid from entering Gaza. Nearly 1 million Palestinians are on the brink of famine due to the lack of food, water, and medical aid. The Israeli military operations have come with full-throated support from the White House. For months, the Biden administration refused to even call for a ceasefire. The U.S. has sent tens of thousands of bombs to Israel, and investigations into attacks on civilian targets in Gaza have found that American munitions were used to slaughter innocent people. And so I think probably what's contributing most to the sharp rise in the recruitment for these jihadist groups or inspiration for lone wolf attacks is going to be the images that are circulating social media. And I mean, we're talking about multiple videos, especially in recent weeks, of beheaded Palestinian children, dismembered Palestinian children. Hell, even the photos that you see of, they have this camp, I think it's in Qatar. I think it's a leftover from the World Cup maybe, or maybe some previous Olympics game, something like that. But they have like this massive sports facility and village, and they've converted it into a little like rehabilitation facility for Gazan children with amputations. And so, I mean, you know, you watch these videos and just dozens and dozens of these kids, you know, those like under 10 years old, just one leg, no legs, one arm, no arms. I mean, it's so horrific. It's so horrific to even look at what are supposed to be the positive pictures of these children recovering, you know, much less, again, the very gruesome pictures of children just covered in burns, again, you know, losing limbs or you know, even entire portions of their bodies, parents who have, you know, recovered just small pieces of their children, or you know, it even, like, set aside the gruesome images, the lack of aid, the lack of food, the lack of water. You look at these videos, are not videos, photos of kids, and the little legs of the Palestinian babies can't fill the holes in the diaper, and you just see these wrinkled legs and diapers, and is so hard to look at. And you have to imagine that, you know, I'm an American, right? So I'm very far away from Palestine, but the Palestinian people are a part of the, you know, Muslim and Arab world of the Middle East. And so, you know, for people who feel kinship and, you know, solidarity with the Palestinians on a little bit more like tribal and familial level, you know, they feel like these are their people. I'm sure this is just unwatchable day after day. And we hear, and you look and you see Palestinians say this on social media on a daily basis, that this is just so horrific and so hard to look at. So many of their people being ruthlessly slaughtered, and with the unconditional and unrelenting support of the White House. All right, next up here, this is, I think, a very significant piece from Heret. It's titled, Heret confirms Israel issued Hannibal Doctrine on October 7th. Now, of course, for anybody who watched this show, and especially because of the great work of people like the Electronic Intifada, Mondo Weiss, the Gray Zone, you know, Matt Blumenthal and the crew over there. This has been very well documented. Oh, by the way, I always forget to leave off, but Brad Pierce, our very own Brad Pierce at the Libertarian Institute, has done a lot of work documenting this, and you know, the reasons to question the initial narrative put forward by Israel on and after October 7th. But here, this coming from a mainstream Israeli outlet is the kind of thing that you're going to get labeled a conspiracy theorist. You may even lose your Twitter, your Facebook, your YouTube account if you push this October 7th narrative too hard. However, you know, Heret saying it gives you a lot of cover. It's like when you talked about the lab leak theory for years, right? And people are getting banned from all these different platforms and kicked off of Facebook and social media. And, you know, that could have been the reason I was kicked off of Facebook. And then Jon Stewart comes out and makes a joke about it to Stephen Colbert. And then suddenly it's just fine to say, I think this is going to be that kind of moment for this issue. So these are some selections from the Heret article that I thought were really important and I'm going to go through on the show. So Heret writes, Gaza division operates and airstrikes in the first hour of October 7th were based on limited information. The first long moments after the Hamas attack was launched were chaotic. Reports were coming in with their significance now is clear. When their meeting was understood, it was realized that something horrific had taken place. Communication networks could not keep up with the flow of information, as it was the case for soldiers sending these reports. However, these messages conveyed at 11:22 a.m. across the Gaza division network was understood by everyone. Not a single vehicle can return to Gaza was the order. At this point, the IDF was not aware of the extent of the kidnappings along the Gaza border, but it did know that many people were involved. Thus, it was entirely clear that what the message was that was being sent and what the fate was of some of the kidnapped people would be. At 6:43 a.m., at which time rocket barrages were launched at Israel, and thousands of Hamas operatives were attacking army strongholds at the division's observation and communication capabilities, the division commander, Brigadier General Avi Rosenfeld, declared that the Philistines had invaded. This is the procedure when an enemy invades Israeli territory, upon which a division commander can assume extraordinary authority, including the employment of heavy fire inside Israeli territory in order to block the enemy raid. A very senior IDF source confirmed to Heret that the Hannibal procedure was employed on October 7th, adding that this was not used by the division commander who gave the order. This, said the source, will perhaps be established by post-war investigations. One of those decisions was made at 7:18 a.m. when an observation post at the outpost reported that someone had been kidnapped at the Ezra border crossing adjacent to the IDF liaison office. Hannibal at Heret came the command from the division headquarters. Dispatch a Zik. A Zik is an unmanned assault drone. The meaning of this command was clear. So, the very clear meaning of the command was you're going to take out the vehicles that are potentially carrying this kidnapped soldier. So this wasn't the last time such an order was heard over the communications network. Over in the next half hour, the division realized that Hamas terrorists has managed to kill and abduct soldiers serving at the crossing and the adjacent base. Then at 7:41 a.m., it happened again. Hannibal at Ertz, an assault on the crossing and the base, just so that no more soldiers be taken. Such commands were given later as well. The decision to conduct strikes inside outposts, says a senior defense official, will haunt senior commanders all their lives. Anyone making such a decision knew that our combatants in the area could be hit as well. But such attacks took place, it turns out, not only inside outposts or bases. At 10:32 a.m., a new order was issued, according to which all battalions in the area were ordered to fire mortars in the direction of the Gaza Strip. Internal discussions in the army noted that this order was attributed to Brigadier General Rosenfeld, was heavily criticized since at that time the IDF did not have a complete picture of all the forces in the area, including soldiers and civilians. Some of these were in open areas or in woods along the border, trying to hide from the terrorists. At this point, the army did not know the number of people who had been kidnapped. We thought they had numbered dozens at this stage, a military source told Heret. Firing mortars at the Gaza Strip would endanger them as well. Furthermore, another order given at 11:22 a.m., according to which no vehicle would be allowed to return to Gaza, took this step even further. So a source in the Southern Command told Heret everyone knew by then that such vehicles could be carrying kidnapped civilians or soldiers. There was no case in which a vehicle carrying kidnapped people was knowingly attacked, but you couldn't really know if there was such people in a vehicle. I can't say there was any clear instructions, but everyone knew what it meant to not let any vehicles return to Gaza. A new development occurred at 2 p.m. All the forces were instructed not to exit border communities towards the west in the direction of the border, with an emphasis on not chasing terrorists. At that point, the border area was under intense fire directed at anyone in that area, making it a danger zone. The instruction, said the source in the Southern Command, was meant to turn the area around the border fence into a killing field, close it off to the west. And so just to clarify, what the IDF ordered there was they told their forces, don't continue to push towards the border area and try to either push the Hamas fighters back into Gaza or rescue the hostages that are being captured by Hamas, but rather to stay away from the border area to push further west. And the reason for that, or not to push further west, and the reason for that was because that area was going to be heavily bombed and destroyed, and they're basically going to kill anyone in that area. So this was the Hannibal directive that we all had talked about for some amount of time now. Again, there's a lot of people, Matt Blumenthal, Brad Pierce, the crew at Electronic and Fonda and Mondo Weiss that deserve a lot more credit than myself for this, because they took a lot of heat for everything that they were doing, researching, writing on this issue. But this was well known for some time. This is just further confirmation of what we have been reporting. So that, that's a big deal there. Now, it doesn't get into this article in any way of how many people were potentially killed during these operations. And I think that's an important point to all of this. I didn't necessarily think it would be in the initial moments after October 7th. I figure, and I do think this is still true, that Hamas bears a lot more responsibility for the death of these Israeli captives. They put a gun to their head, they forced them into these cars, and they started driving these cars towards the border with Gaza. I think where this really changes the narrative is, of course, we are told that on October 7th, Hamas did cruel and horrific things. Not just that they went on a rampage in Israel and started killing people, but that they did so in gruesome ways. Like, this was meant to send a message: beheading babies, cooking babies in the oven, the mass rape of women. All these things now agreed to be hoaxes were initially reported as true. And it was that supposed overreaction by Hamas which gave Israel such a green light for the massive overreaction that we've seen from them since, this ethnic cleansing campaign within the Gaza Strip. And so I just want to get into here that if a significant number of the Israeli civilians killed on October 7th were killed in these cars, that further cuts against this narrative that, Hamas was just going into Israel on a blood rampage, that this really was an operation that had a sensible goal, right? Where they wanted to kidnap these Israelis, bring them back into Gaza, and then exchange them for Palestinian hostages held by Israel. They arrest so many people in Israel, Palestinians that are just placed under administrative detention. They really don't have rights. They're not, heard in any kind of reasonable courtroom. And so understandable why, members of Hamas would pursue this tactic. I'm not saying that I agree or approve of kidnapping civilians in order to change them for other civilians, but you can understand this, I think, as a sensible mission, not just some blood quest to kill as many Jews as possible, which has been what was told to the American and the Israeli people over the past 9 months. So just to wrap up here, as far as Haaretz knows, even at 9:33 p.m., this was still the situation on the ground. At that time, there was further orders from Southern Command, close off all borders areas with taints. In fact, all forces in the area received permission to open fire on anyone approaching the border area without any restrictions. The IDF spokesperson responded to this by saying that the army has been fighting 6 months at very high intensity on several fronts, focused on attaining the war's objectives. In tandem, the IDF has begun conducting internal investigations of what transpired on October 7th and the preceding period. The aim of these investigations is to learn and to draw lessons which could be used in continuing the battle. When these investigations are concluded, the results will be presented to the public with transparency. And one of these reports out is due mid-July, so this is probably why people are starting to talk about it now. All right, next one here. This from Dave DeCamp, July 7th, antiwar.com. Netanyahu sabotaging deal with Hamas by issuing list of demands. So the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a list of demands for a potential hostage deal ahead of more indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas, a move seen by mediators and Israeli officials as an attempt to sabotage chances for an agreement. Netanyahu's list of demands, which he called non-negotiable, include a condition that Israel would be allowed to resume military operations until all objectives of the war have been achieved. Netanyahu's objectives include the eradication of Hamas, a goal the Israeli military says is not realistic. Hamas's primary condition for A deal is a permanent ceasefire, and Netanyahu's insistence on having the ability to resume his genocidal war appears to be the main obstacle. The Israeli leader's repeated public comments about the issue led Hamas to ask for stronger guarantees during previous negotiations. According to media reports, Hamas has softened its stance a bit by not asking for Israel to commit to a permanent ceasefire right away. However, the Palestinian group is asking for mediators to provide written guarantees that negotiations for a permanent truce will continue once the first phase of the deal goes into effect. An Israeli security official told Channel 12 that by issuing its list of demands, Netanyahu is emphasizing the gaps between Israel and Hamas just before an Israeli delegation heads to fresh round of negotiations. Netanyahu's list of demands include: 1. Any deal will allow Israel to resume fighting until all objectives of the war have been achieved. 2. There will be no smuggling of weapons to Hamas from Egypt to the Gaza border. 3. There will be no return of thousands of armed terrorists to the northern Gaza Strip. 4. Israel will maximize the number of living hostages who will be released from Hamas captivity. Another Israeli security official slammed Netanyahu, saying he pretends he wants the deal but is working to torpedo it. A senior official from one of the countries mediating the negotiations told the Times of Israel that Netanyahu's non-negotiable demand about the resumption of fighting hits at the most sensitive issue in the negotiations. The report said the mediators have convinced Hamas to keep in place the ambiguous language that both allows Israel to feel comfortable enough it has the ability to resume fighting if Hamas ceases to negotiate in good faith, and Hamas feels comfortable enough that the mediators will prevent Israel from resuming the war instead of implementing a permanent ceasefire, that this is stage 2 of the deal. The senior official said the statements made by the prime minister severely harm efforts to maintain that ambiguity, and added that it is likely done purely for political purposes. Netanyahu's demands are seen as an effort to appease the national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has threatened to quit the government if a deal with Hamas is reached. And Ben-Gvir is pretty critical to Netanyahu maintaining his government in Israel. All right, next up here, newborn babies had little chance of survival in Gaza. Sky News reports the chances of a newborn baby surviving in Gaza now are not good. On the malnutrition ward at the Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza, babies only days old are often premature, fight for their lives. Mothers are so malnourished themselves that they cannot breastfeed, and so babies are dying, literally starving to death because they cannot get the vital nutrition that newborns need. So this is Dr. Hassam Abu Saif, the hospital's director, who said within 2 weeks we detected more than 250 patients of malnutrition. This was all detected in one hospital, our hospital, which means the number will most likely increase in the coming days. We ask the world to allow the entry of food and the entry of clean water. The body of a baby that does not pull through lies in the hospital incubator awaiting burial. She was born 2 months premature because her mother was so exhausted. Too soon for her parents to even name her. Her tiny body is now wrapped in a green shroud. Another struggles for each breath. The bones of her exposed ribcage heaved up and down with little strength as she tries to keep living. Their babies dwarf their skeletal bodies. So, I mean, just horrific what's happening to Gaza's children. And last up here today is one from Al Jazeera. Israel kills 16 Palestinians sheltering at UN school in Gaza. So Al Jazeera reports at least 16 Palestinians have been killed in an Israeli attack on a United Nations-run school sheltering displaced people in the Gaza Strip, the Gaza government media office said, as Israel continues to pound the besieged coastal territory. In a statement on Saturday, the government media office said more than 75 people were also injured in the attack on the Al Jawlin school in central Gaza's Nusrat refugee camp. We condemn the Israeli occupation for committing these ongoing crimes and massacres against civilians, children and women, it said. The Nusrat facility, run by the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, is the latest school to be bombed by the Israeli military since the Gaza war began on October 7th. At least 38,098 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli attacks across the Gaza Strip since October 7th, and the besieged enclave faces dire shortages of food, water, medicine, and other humanitarian supplies. On Saturday, dozens of Palestinians, including 5 journalists, were killed as the Israeli military stepped up its bombardment of the territory. So, just continues to get worse and worse for the people of Gaza. All right, everyone, that's where I'm wrapping up the show today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know if you liked the new format. If you didn't, just tell me. If you did, write a comment section somewhere, like on YouTube, say, "Let's Great Kyle," something like that. Really appreciate everyone. And if you can, donate to the Libertarian Institute. More later in the week.